So much angst, so little content. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2019 movie Bloodbound. This is the first 2019 movie I reviewed, and I'm pretty excited about it. Unfortunately, what I wound up watching was a movie that tried to combine the timeless elements of slow pacing with dull characters, and it managed to achieve a fairly tepid payoff. There was a nugget of a fledgling of a great concept in there, but it was just really never brought to life. And to get into more detail than that, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot of this one, I gave a 7 out of 25. This followed a set of 3 teenagers, late teens, that are heroin users and ne'er-do-wells and so on. And in attempting to rob a house, they wind up inadvertently being the subjects of witches' covens rituals that actually span the course of just under a year. And during that time, they are under the witch's power. To some degree, they can't speak about what they've encountered. I mean, they literally cannot speak about it when they try. When the witches show up, which is often and pretty much as the plot demands, they are within the physical entanglement of the witch's spell until the ritual achieves its final goal of various sacrifices and so forth. This movie, I mean, at least it was coherent, but regardless, it was way too slow for entirely too little of a payoff. There were a lot of elements of this movie where, to its credit, it had a lot going on underneath the surface. You know, when characters were talking to one another, they did have something brewing underneath. What you see is not necessarily what you get. There was hidden motives and so forth that you kind of figured were there because the surface level stuff on its face value was ridiculously illogical, but knowing that there was subterfuge going on, it makes it a little bit more bearable. But even so, when the shoe dropped and it was time for the veil to be lifted, and this happened many times, it was with a whimper and nothing much happened with it. So it was extraordinarily frustrating on a lot of levels. This movie relied a lot on character interaction and dialogue, and I don't think either one of them were written terribly well. So, I mean, really, this just needed a lot of rewrites and spit and polish on the screenplay, and the plot, as it was written, I just can't give it any more than 7 out of 25 points. The intent of this one, I gave a 2 out of 25. This was not scary. This was not interesting, and I think it was trying to be both. And the characters themselves, I mean, the movie even admitted that the characters were picked because they were apathetic ne'er-do-wells that, care about nothing and nobody and only do harm to themselves and others. And in a situation like that, when you have a character-driven storyline, who do we latch onto? Who is our protagonist? Who do we emotionally care about so that we are walking in their shoes as the storyline unfolds so that we have an emotional investment in the outcome? The answer to this movie was nobody. I was pretty much just watching people on the screen talking in very bland syllables and just not really doing a whole lot that I really cared about. When it did have kind of, effects and action and gore and so forth, it was pretty watered down. There was a few moments of it that worked a little bit, on at least an interesting level, definitely not a scary level. But ultimately, I just have a feeling that whatever this movie was trying to achieve, it wound up not doing so and almost put me to sleep in the process. The acting, I gave a 10 out of 25. This was not terrible on the acting front, but I honestly just can't say that it was good. Everybody in this was flat and angsty and one note, and it was just flavorless toothpaste of acting jobs. Even the main character, if you can call her that's father, pretty much just played the same thing all the time, which was angry and frustrated at his daughter's behavior. At no point was any depth brought to him or his performance, and that's pretty much true, I can say, of everybody in this. How you see them when they first show up is how you will see them throughout the entirety of the movie with no range at all. The technical, I gave a 14 out of 25. This had some really beautiful camera work and scenery, and credit to it for that. But I really just can't help but think that a lot of scenes could have had a lot more impact if they had been approached just a bit differently. And that comes down to a lot of direction and editing. But there was one scene in particular, without giving any spoilers, because these reviews are spoiler-free, where ritual was taking place, kind of cloaked figures around a campfire in the dark in the woods kind of thing, and they were being watched and crept up on, and then they realized they were being watched and looked at the people that were watching them. And the entire scene was really flat, and the only thing that I could really think while I was watching this was, execution-wise, there was really... there was, how do I put this? Conceptually, there was no difference between this and the scene with the doctors being noticed that they were being watched in House on Haunted Hill through the eye of the lens of the camcorder, which to me was just one of the most haunting, scary scenes I can recall out of 90s and early 2000s horror movies. It was just really, really iconic, and it worked terribly well. And conceptually, there was no difference between these two. But in reality, it was just massive difference, whereas that one was, like I said, iconic and scary as all get out, filling with dread and immense terror. And this one, it was just something that happened. Period. And like no emotion behind it, no fear, no terror, no interest, no intrigue, no anything. It just happened, and then moving on to the next scene. And it was, I don't know, it was just a shame. And there were just a lot of those little missed opportunities throughout the entire movie. And it really could have just done with a lot more collaborative work and polish, from the screenplay all the way to the editing. And that's why, in the end, I gave this a total of 33 out of 100 points. I would really just not recommend this one. It's not a terrible movie, but it's basically just a snoozer that wasn't worth the time investment because it didn't have any interesting characters or any good scares. And when you're having a character-driven horror movie, that's a pretty big sin. So that should about do it for my review of 2019's Bloodbound. I really thank you for joining me here today. If you like these videos, please click like and subscribe. If you want to support me further, my Patreon link is below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.